Hello there. Welcome to episode 6 of Multifaceted. It's Chelsea here, and I am so excited to come on and deepen into the self-awareness conversation that we will be having over the month of July. Last week we talked about self-sabotage, and because this is multifaceted, we're going to be talking a little bit more today in depth and in detail about 3 very important, very key facets of who we are and how that makes us tick, and how we can actually, with more awareness, with more understanding and more knowledge, we can actually start to use this information to our advantage so that we can start to call in, invite in, walk towards better and better things in our lives. So self-awareness is always such an important thing. It's one of my favorite topics of conversation, and so I'm so excited to dive into this topic in a few moments. Before we start, for those of you who are watching, I would love to know where you're watching from. If you're watching the replay, it's really important for me to know who watches this. So if you are watching it after the fact, after this has been recorded, say hi in the comments. Let me know where you're watching from. If you're watching the replay, I would love to know, and it's just really helpful for me to see that. Also, if you have any questions, anything that you want to know more about, any topics you'd like to hear me talk about, please let me know as well. I have, over the last couple of weeks, had quite a few new people come into my space, so I'm just going to do another quick little introduction of who I am before we get started, and then we'll dive into this topic of conversation today, all about the 3 very important facets of who we are and how we are made up out of those 3 important facets, how they all interact, and how we can get a better understanding of them so that we can we can really start to elevate our lives and really work with the up levels that we're desiring, start to walk towards the best possible version of who we are, who we know that we're here to be, and who we may be hiding from a little bit, depending on what's going on. So I am Chelsea, and I am the creator of The Comeback Queen, which is a Facebook group, and it's really for women who are working towards elevating and amplifying who they are through adversity, through the difficult things that they've been through. This has been a big part of my story, and it's something that, having overcome some pretty big challenges in my life, I have now turned that into my life's work, which is something that I'm so very excited about. I worked for about 12 years as a naturopath, so that's a little bit about my background. Hey Aubrey, so great to see you here. Hey Dave. So basically, my work started from, a little bit more, it was always very holistic, of course, working as a naturopath and looking at, how we are made up of all of these important components of who we are. And, of course, even though within naturopathic medicine, we look at the spirit, we look at the soul, we look at, our emotions, our physical body, I really ended up having a desire to learn more. I was just always so fascinated with the mind, so working with my patients and, helping them with so many of their physical ailments, my attention would always go to, what was going on in their mind, what was going on with their connection to source or lack thereof, how they viewed themselves in the world. So the mind is such an important thing to me, and we're going to be talking a lot about the mind today in this topic of multifaceted. So along my journey, and also wanting to be able to work with people more and more online, I just, ended up leaving the whole naturopathic world, because of course that really requires, more often than not, for me to be in a clinical setting. I love being able to work from home. I love being able to support my clients online from anywhere in the world. And as I mentioned, I'm more than anything fascinated with the mind. So also really fascinated with this whole world of coaching and how, you know, as a naturopath, I kind of always felt like I was giving my clients, oh, thank you so much for the love, that I was giving my clients, you know, all sorts of things to improve on in their lives, you know, all sorts of recommendations and things that they could, you know, do to improve their health, but not actually helping them with how to do that. You know, so that's why coaching became a really important part of my work and my life, because I'm not so interested in just helping support you in what is needed. It's how do you do it? You know, how do you take all of the components that you're trying to put together in your life and actually make it work and make it fit with what you need? And I believe that that's something that's so important. Further along the journey, I got interested in hypnotherapy, started learning all sorts of other tools, but hypnotherapy is such an important one for me because, of course, it looks at the subconscious mind and how the subconscious mind really impacts our behaviors. And we're going to talk a little bit about that today. So today is multifaceted, and so grateful for those of you who are watching. Before we start, I just want to say hi, and I'd love to see who's here. Say hi in the comments. Let me know where you're watching from. And if you have any questions along the way. So this live series is multifaceted, and it came out of a desire that I had to really share how multidimensional we are, you know, how important it is to look at who we are and how we operate from so many different angles so that we can really understand ourselves. You know, I'm fascinated by people. I'm fascinated by our stories and all of the things that, you know, happen in our lives that make up who we are, our ancestry, all of the factors in our upbringing, the way that we think, the way that we act as a result of that. We are incredibly multifaceted beings. We are beautiful beings. We struggle. We struggle a lot. And I think that it's in the understanding of what's really going on there, and also in shining a light on what's possible for us beyond that, you know, beyond that struggle. That's where I am really inspired to support others. So of course, this is our 6th episode of Multifaceted, and I'm so excited to see where this goes and to just continue on. But it's also an exploration in all of the multifaceted tools that we have at our disposal to help support our progress, to support our up level, our comeback, whatever you want to call it. You know, for us who are striving to get better, to really step into our purpose, the highest version of who we are, it's looking at all of those things. So today we're going to be talking about 3 important facets of who we are. And this is really beautiful work. You may have seen this, you may have heard of this. I'm just going to do a little bit of an exploration on this. There's so many books out there on this. It's a topic that I'm really passionate about, and it really helps to put together a lot of the puzzle pieces of our behavior, human behavior, why we do the things we do, why we sabotage, why we, you know, experience blocks and all of the things that keep us stuck. So the 3 components, the 3 facets of who we are, we're going to be talking about today. This comes from the work of a woman named Susan Anderson, and it's looking at the interplay between 3 important components: our inner child, which many of you are probably familiar with, our outer child, and our adult self. So I'm going to go into a little bit of an explanation of all 3 of those, and these aspects of who we are and how they each have an impact on why we do the things we do, why we feel the way we feel, and what to do about it. You know, how to take this information so that we can actually start to, you know, get out of feeling stuck and start to move forward so that we can invite more and more incredible things into our lives. We can take a look at the things that we really have been desiring to do. I don't know about you, but there's certain things in my life that I wanted for so long, and I felt so stuck on them for so long. And it was so important to me not only to experience progress in it, but to also understand why I was stuck, so that I could not only help myself, but then also help others. It's just something, as I mentioned, throughout this whole journey that's brought me up to this point of where I am, to really understand why this all happens, so that I can support others. And so, oh, you're in Xenia, Ohio, Aubrey. I've never been to Ohio. Thank you so much for watching. And it's wonderful to have met you. Looking forward to getting to know you better. All right, so we're gonna get started on this whole topic of the 3 facets of who we are. So starting with our inner child, again, you may be familiar with this. This is the part of us that feels, and it's the part of us that has the really core emotions, you know, the sadness, anger, frustration, loneliness, you know, even feelings of abandonment, all of those feelings. And it's the part of us that really also has deep needs, you know, the need to feel safe, the need to feel loved and cared for, and that we belong, all of those things. The other aspect is our outer child. This is the part of us that acts. So this is the part of us that often acts out, you know, the part of us that is a little bit more spontaneous, that wants fun, that, you know, has maybe knee-jerk reactions, that might say or do something that we regret later. So this is kind of like a teenaged version of us that really, if this part of us ran the show, we would have fun all of the time, and we probably wouldn't get anything done. And then of course there's our adult self. And our adult self is the part of us that is here to nurture our inner child, and that's also here to parent our outer child. So when we are not doing those things, when we're not looking after ourselves from that perspective of parenting and nurturing, which sometimes we don't do, right? If we didn't learn to do that, if it wasn't modeled to us, if we don't see it as a priority, and we just let our inner child and our outer child run the show, you can imagine, and this was me for a long, long time, it was basically a pattern of getting into situation after situation that, you know, was really like it was just an overall mess, to put it bluntly, you know. And I basically went from mess to mess, and by cleaning up my old messes, I created new messes, and it just kept kind of snowballing like that until I hit a very crucial and critical point in my life where, and this is, you know, a moment for all of us that, you know, if we don't learn this, if it's not modeled to us, if we, you know, we end up with this sort of snowball of messes that can happen in our lives. There's this moment, and I'm so grateful that it happened for me. There's this moment that I just woke up and realized, okay, something's got to give here. And it's this moment where, you know, our adult self actually does finally start to kick in and start to realize the importance of really standing tall in this whole experience and starting to do the nurturing and the parenting of these other aspects of who we are. So having a really strong, solid adult self is something that we can develop if we're struggling to move forward in the way that we need to, in the way that we desire to. And it's by really getting a deeper understanding of the other 2 aspects. One of the things that I learned in this whole process is that usually the outer child, the part of us, and this is something, you know, as I'm describing this, if you can kind of connect with this and think about parts of yourself and how this might apply, but the outer child, the part of us that really does want to have fun all of the time, that wants to feel good and wants the immediate gratification, that part of us, you know, if you kind of start to connect and think about how that shows up for you, that part of us is very, very often protecting and acting out to protect a deeper part of us that really feels either a loss or a sense of abandonment. And ironically, what happens is, when we have a desire to have our life go a certain way, have important and beautiful things happen in our life, and we start walking towards that, and then we fall off and we sabotage it, our inner child actually perceives that as a form of self-abandonment. So it's like this really interesting interplay between the three aspects of ourselves. And again, by starting to tease out and looking at these three different aspects and understanding them deeply, and again, this is what we're talking about this whole month of July in Multifaceted, it's just really deepening into the self-awareness of who we are. So starting to understand why we might be, when we're sabotaging ourselves, what it is that we're actually protecting. There's maybe a fear or a sadness or a loneliness or a sense of abandonment, whatever that is within us that we're protecting. Partly because we don't want to necessarily look at that. We're afraid of even just opening that door and starting to explore it. So it's just a tender act and a tender process to start to look at this and start to do this work, but it's also incredibly powerful. So again, just going into how this applies, you may be thinking about this within your own life, within your own, sort of history of how you ended up right where you are today. What kinds of patterns have evolved and what kinds of, behaviors that you've noticed in yourself, and what kinds of also frustrations that you've noticed, repeated patterns where it feels like no matter what, you go through this cycle over and over and over again, and it feels like, just kind of getting back to square one. So what you can do is, of course, start to explore these aspects of this. It's really powerful to do journal work on this, to start to understand. You can actually do this reparenting work in written form. You can actually dialogue between the different aspects of yourself through journaling. That's one thing that can be done. There's all sorts of other ways. And of course, through coaching or working with a therapist as well to help support you, depending on how deep and how serious this is for you. Of course, a lot of us, if we've gone through very painful, traumatic childhoods, this can really show up in a way that can impact our lives. So I think one of the most important things about this conversation for me is to just, open up more and more awareness of this, so that if you're watching, if you're connecting with this, and if you're feeling like you've been feeling stuck for a long time, again, just becoming more aware. And then what? It's like, what are the next steps? What are we going to do about this? How are we going to start to shift things so that moving forward, you're strengthening the nurturer and the parent for yourself, so that you can, continue to do whatever healing work is needed to do. And you can, of course, still have pleasure and enjoyment and fun in your life. That's one of the things that's so important when we're doing this, is that we don't just, cut off all forms of enjoyment and pleasure so that we're healing through this. It's that finding a beautiful balance and an ability to allow ourselves to, of course, have more healthy pleasures in our lives and start to shift away from, certain things that might give us immediate gratification, that might make us feel good in the moment, but then we feel bad later as well. So again, it's our adult self, of course, that determines that and decides that. And each of these three facets of who we are controlled by different parts of our brain as well. So I'm not going to get into the details of that, but it's just something to know that we're working with different aspects of our brain. And that's also why the act of journaling and doing the dialogue between these three parts of our brain, you're almost like working as an interpreter or you're working as a mediator, talking to these parts of yourself so that you can, just really start to gain progress, more understanding, allowing that inner child, that part of you that just that so deeply needs to feel loved and accepted and cared for and supported and validated, and that they matter, and so that outer child can still be allowed to express himself or herself, to have joy and to have excitement and things to look forward to, and to celebrate when incredible things happen, when milestones are reached, when we've accomplished something that we've been striving for a really long time. So again, this is just looking at each of these facets of who we are and really understanding them, but then also celebrating them. I don't know, if you guys have any comments or questions so far, but to me, this is just such a beautiful thing about who we are as humans, and how, the more that we can understand this about ourselves, the more that we can start to move forward. And I don't know if you happened to have caught my self-sabotage story that I shared over the weekend. If you haven't seen it, it's there as a highlight now on my Instagram page, which is chelsea.frederick. And I shared a big piece of my own self-sabotage from a good chunk of my adult life. And this whole self-sabotage piece for me was getting into relationships that were not healthy for me. And this was an ongoing pattern, relationships where I was actually abandoning myself, abandoning my purpose, abandoning my needs, and really just putting all my energy into relationship drama, into the needs of the person that I happened to be with at that time. And it was a complete abandonment of self. And this, as I mentioned, I talked about the messes at the start of this conversation. This was part of the messes that I'm talking about. Not all of it, but it was a big part of it. And basically, it was in finally looking back and realizing and seeing how this pattern was playing out, and that I was in charge. I was in control. I was the one who could finally put my foot down and say, we're not doing that anymore. And that's the adult self stepping in, and just, again, very lovingly, one of the things that we can do to ourselves is that we can be hard on ourselves when we do this. And we need to really be aware, once again, of how we're talking to ourselves through this progress. So this dialogue between our three aspects of who we are, we want it to be very compassionate and loving and understanding, even for, the mistakes that we make, even for the moments where it feels like we've really screwed up. It feels like we've just really messed things up. And, I think we've all had moments like that. And it's really, a deciding factor how we are with ourselves. And, this could have been something that happened years ago. There's always an opportunity to forgive yourself. And there's always an opportunity to heal through that so that you can. And this is a big part. This is, again, more of the role of the adult self, to be that nurturer and to also be the one that finally puts their foot down and says, no, we're choosing something different now. And we're moving forward. We're walking towards this desire, this goal. For me, it was my business, my work, this work that I'm doing now. And I've seen such huge shifts in my life over the last, this has been a bit of I would say, when I first when this first really smacked me in the face, it was about 10 years ago. And so it's been a really beautiful process of gaining more and more understanding and starting to make the shifts. It's not always overnight, but again, this whole aspect of us being multifaceted, it's looking at, again, you know, and I'm talking about just the mind right now. We're not really even getting into, you know, spiritual aspect or other things that can also impact this. We're just looking really at the mind. And so there's so much more to it. There's a lot of healing. There's a lot of release. I've done all sorts of things to help myself really learn to stay on track. Even just looking at the aspect of, you know, how within each of us, our masculine and feminine balance plays a role in all of this. Okay, so I just want to kind of share that there's more to this, but this is just one little pinpoint way of looking at ourselves and really understanding. And it sounds like, Aubrey, you can relate to part of the story that I'm sharing. And yeah, we all have our very, you know, unique fingerprint, our own unique past of what we've been through, and how this pattern, how this triad of these three aspects of ourselves plays a role. So I'm hoping this is helpful for those of you who are watching now and watching later, and, you know, just kind of to take away, you know, what can you do with this? Definitely, if you have any questions, reach out. But also, I think the first thing you'd want to do, even just after this, is to take out a piece of paper and just start kind of writing out a little bit of, you know, what clarity came from this, and how this might, you know, shine a light on what you can do going forward. You know, how are you going to nurture yourself more and more and more? I don't think we can ever nurture ourselves enough. And how are you going to start to parent yourself, to guide yourself more and more and more? And also, you know, this is a really good opportunity to, while you're writing out, get clear again on where it is that you're wanting to go. You know, having a really clear conversation with yourself from that perspective of the person that's in charge, the person that's running the show, the person that really gets to decide and create and be the author of the beautiful life that you're desiring. What is it that you really desire? And start to notice. What's really interesting, and now that you have the awareness of this, is as you're writing, you'll start to notice if doubt kicks in, if, you know, you start being hard on yourself, if you want to all of a sudden procrastinate and, you know, go do something really fun. You'll start to notice these aspects of yourself kicking in, and again, it'll help to trigger this ability to start to shift into, are you going to be nurturing yourself more in this situation, or are you going to be parenting yourself more in this situation? So, you know, with this going forward, whether you're going to be doing regular journaling, whether you're going to be, you know, seeking out support, if you're interested in, you know, deepening into this conversation, one of the things that I've been doing with Multifaceted, if you're not already in, thank you, Aubrey, if you're not already in the Comeback Queen, that's my free Facebook group. The Comeback Queen is where we take this conversation that we started today, and we are going to deepen it even more. So within the Comeback Queen, on Tuesday and on Thursday, as well as Sunday, I go live in that group in a different format, and we will be taking this conversation and deepening it further. So if you're interested in an invite, or if you want the link to join the Comeback Queen, let me know and I can add you into that group. And we're just gonna keep going with this conversation, and of course through the whole month of July, talking about different aspects of self-awareness, which is very exciting. And then the other thing that's available for you, if you're interested in some support and some guidance and some mentorship on this and many other aspects of how you can, you know, take what you're learning here and take what's been going on for you and take what you need into your next phase of your life. You know, where are you going from here? What is so important to you that you can't stop thinking about it? What is it that you really desire for yourself? I have created a new program or a new offering, and it's called Multifaceted Membership, or sorry, Multifaceted Mentorship. And Multifaceted Mentorship is an opportunity to work one-on-one with me, and we take all sorts of things, all sorts of tools. Again, it's very multifaceted work that we do. And whether it's looking at inner child work, whether it's looking at, the things that have been holding you back, patterns that are showing up, blocks, what's going on in your subconscious, using all of the tools that we have available to help support you in your up level, in your progress, in your comeback, so that you can really start to make some incredible things happen in your life. Also releasing what no longer serves you, whether those are thoughts, whether those are potentially relationships, or how you've been in certain relationships, releasing beliefs, releasing ways of being, so that you can really start to elevate and move forward. So Multifaceted Mentorship, if you're interested in that, you can just reach out and we can just chat a little bit more about, how that can work for you. And I would love to just hear from you and learn more about who you are. As I mentioned at the start of this, I love hearing people's stories. I love hearing about, how you've overcome what you've been through, how you've been able to stay strong through the difficult moments in your life, and to be able to co-create and to be able to partner up and have that support. One of the biggest things that I've learned, thank you so much, one of the biggest things that I've learned is that, the moments that I really did reach out and ask for help and speak truth to what I was going through, and just allow myself to be seen and heard and supported. I would love to talk to you about that, Aubrey. That sounds beautiful. So overall, it's really an opportunity for you to reach out. My very first session is just a free consultation, so there's no obligation. It's just a chat. It's an opportunity for us to get to know each other, which I would love. Oh, Aubrey's a storyteller. I love that. Yeah, that sounds wonderful. Okay, well, we'll connect. So the two things: the Comeback Queen, if you're interested in joining, the Multifaceted Mentorship, and then of course, as I mentioned, getting out a piece of paper and starting to write a little bit more about how you may have been abandoning yourself, how you may have been, allowing your outer child to just run the show and act out and have way too much fun, so that you're not, getting the stuff done that you need to get done, and how you can start to bring all of that together, because of course, all these three facets of who we are have their own power. And when you can get all three facets of who you are working together, that's where your power lies, and that's where incredible things can start to happen for you. So thank you so much for watching. So much love to all of you. Aubrey, I'll reach out to you. We can chat a little bit more. And I will see you again here next week at 1 p.m. Mountain Time for episode 7 of Multifaceted. Lots of love.